I've played a fair number of games with the Screaming Ravens now, and I'm starting to get a grasp on the strengths and weaknesses of this very silly 80 Centurion Vanguard Spearhead list. After taking my army, consisting of 50% pure A-grade chonk to a 40k Super Major, I've been trying to refine and practice with it to get the most out of my next upcoming Grand Tournament this weekend. I've been trying a few different tweaks to the list, and to try and really nail down a winning combination that doesn't stray too far away from my fluffy vision. I went 1 win and 4 losses at the Super Major, and since then I've managed to pick up another 2 victories. And another 4 defeats. I've not been completely annihilated again, with my losses being very consistently scoring victory points in the high 50s, but usually to my opponent's 100. The biggest weakness is still primary, and getting things that have staying power onto objectives, whilst also getting into position to get rid of my opponent's scoring units. Usually there's some back and forth trading, and if I can come out on top with those trades, my tough Centurions hold the line and my opponent gets whittled down to nothing. But if my opponent could keep a few tricky scoring units around after that firefight, whilst also taking down my weaker fast units, I just don't have the bodies to catch up in scoring, and slow Centurions just do not have the legs to retake those positions. I want to talk about a game that I played at the Winchester RTT a few weeks ago that really exemplifies the core issues with my army, and the main weakness that I'm trying to mitigate with several different changes to my army list to stop this from happening in the future. I used this event to try out a few different ideas, like starting the Devastating Centurions in the Repulsors instead of the Assault Centurions. It didn't work and was a terrible idea, but more on that later. This one game against Blood Angels is the perfect illustration of how this list can be completely shut down, and by understanding in how to pilot an army that's essentially like trying to pilot a flying cruise ship without any steering. To introduce this story and give you an idea of how badly this game went, I want to show you this image. This is the board state at the end of the game. This is my deployment zone. You see this green marker here? That marker represents the furthest distance from my deployment zone that any of my models reached for the entire 5 rounds. This was the game of Warhammer 40k that I was not allowed to play. Before we get started, I want to make this absolutely clear, as I always do. I had a ton of fun in this game, and it was overall a really fun tournament. This event had a game which was a Stomper and 2 Mork/Gorkanauts versus Triple Rampager. The UK tournament community, from my experience, is fantastic, and even though I was basically blocked for an entire 5 rounds, I still had a great time, thanks in no small part to my opponent Reese, who was, say it with me everyone, a really nice guy. Since this game, I've actually played a small 3-game practice friendly versus Reese and a couple of other people, including Brett, who I met at the Super Major, and another Reese with a different spelling of Reese, but not that spelling of Reese, who I hadn't met before, but was no less confusing when trying to organize the games. In that practice-friendly, Reese, the first Reese, not the other Reese, brought a Necron list with the Silent King, a Monolith, and a Tesseract Vault. Across all 3 games, I was the only person to kill that Tesseract Vault, and I did it with an Incursor Mine and a tank shot from a 1-wound repulsor. But I only had to do that despite having 6 Devastating Centurions aimed at it when it only had 5 wounds left, because my goddamn luck decided to draw Airy Denial, which meant I needed to kill this giant fucking Tesseract Vault in melee because it's too bloody big to allow me to move any of my models close enough to be within 3 inches of the center of the board, whilst also not being in melee with this humongous Deathbrick. Hey, speaking of humongous Deathbricks, this video is sponsored by Table Stronghold and their excellent MDF cases and terrain. Okay, maybe calling the Magcase Tube a humongous Deathbrick is a bit much, but if you threw this at someone, it would probably kill them. Especially if you had all the adjustable trays in there that allows minis of any size to be transported safely, and also filled it with a ton of magnets. And with the power of magnets, if you forgot to take your minis out of your mag case before yeeting it at your enemies, you don't even have to worry about those minis being damaged. Right now, get 25% off using code PAUL25 and free shipping to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most of the EU. So thanks again, Tabletop Stronghold, for... Hello? This is the 3rd time I've applied the mag case could be used as a weapon? I don't see... I mean, am I lying? Okay, I'll add a disclaimer, but I really don't... Sorry, one sec. This might be a while. Link in the description. What do you mean liability? I'm the best goddamn advertiser you could ever ask for, you magnetic motherfucker. Anyway, this game I want to talk about was the second of my 3 games. After coming off a loss in my first game, where I went far too wide into some very angry penitent host sisters, this game seemed like a better board layout and deployment for me. My list works better if I can keep things closer and not allow my fewer models to be picked off and focused on their own. With the terrain where it is, I could get forward really quite quickly and stage for future turns. My list is basically the same as my Super Major list, with the only change being swapping the Inferno pistols for Storm Shields on the Vanguard veterans. As much as I like the Inferno pistols, my Super Major outing has shown that I need to be using these veterans as scoring units, and having a bit more staying power is very useful versus trying to get them in close with those Inferno pistols. This might change in the future, as I've found that I've maybe swung too far to the other way and not having enough of a rapid ingress threat, but as we're about to find out in this game, that tactic of starting things in Deep Strike for a later assault can go awry. Reese's Blood Angel list is very Blood Angels, stacked to the 9s with characters Archers and Sanguinary Guard. The Sanguinor just being in the list is an absolute menace, and remembering my experience at the Tabletop Tactics League event against Lamenters, I was not about to make the same mistake again, and would instead make a completely different mistake. Scouts, a Calidus assassin, a lieutenant with combi weapon, and faster jetpack units can get massive bore control, and the threat of a 6-inch deep strike from a big block of Inceptors meant that I had to be careful with my positioning. I started Shrike with 5 jump intercessors in deep strike and my 6-strong squad of Devastators in strategic reserves, with restarting a Vindicator and the Inceptors in the sky as well. I deployed my Assault Centurions on the line alongside my Phobos Lieutenant-led squad of Incursors, with the second squad of Incursors being deployed on my home objective. My Vanguard veterans also started forward to try and get ball control early, and one of the repulsors took to the other side to get onto my closer no man's land objective, with the other repulsor staying a little bit back for any Inceptor shenanigans. As the mission we had was Linchpin, I wanted to ensure that I always had something holding my backline, but you couldn't get an easy drop back there to take that and deny me from scoring lots of points. Even if you can't get onto that objective himself, just killing what's on there from my army would deny me a lot of points. If only I had some way to make that objective sticky. Reese's deployment basically completely destroyed me immediately using only 140 points worth of models. The Infiltrator's rule is extremely powerful, and using a combi lieutenant and a single squad of scouts, he completely shut down my Incursors, as you cannot end a scout move within 9 inches of an enemy. Whether I go first or second, this completely shuts me down. If I go first, I scout first and basically cannot move, and he just then hops his scouts behind the wall. If I go second, he can still just hop those scouts behind the wall, and if I want to move forward into the open, into the restricted area around his combi lieutenant and scouts, I can, but then they'd just be completely piled on by some very fast units and killed. As it happened, I went second. I don't want to talk too much about the RNG of this game, because I believe that luck will balance out over a long enough time frame, and there's always lessons you can learn from losses, even if the dice don't go your way. That being said, I did roll to go second with a low roll. Here's a picture of a dice roll where I needed to make at least one 4-up save. Here's a picture of a Mephiston after he made a 10-inch charge and killed my Incursors and just advanced and move to try and pick up some points on this objective near the end of the game. And Reese's card draw was basically perfect throughout the entire game. Extend battle lines, an area denial, turn 1. Welp. Reese spent his first turn staging, getting 2 squads of Sanguinary Guard, Dante, Mephiston, and the Calidus Assassin into this ruin here to get into my face in the next turn. My turn 1, and I draw Assassination, which is actually doable. And engage on all fronts. Thanks. Looking back on this game, I can see a huge number of mistakes I made and things that I should have done instead. In the past, I've had a tendency to overextend and throw far too much away early and lose the game after a potentially decent alpha strike. The problem I'm having now is that I feel like I'm underextending and playing too cagey. I also think getting Assassination here was a bit of a trap, with the cards dictating my movements to be less effective than they could have been. Reese's Combi Lieutenant is out in the open, but if I get within 9 inches of it, it can do a reactive move and just hide behind the wall with the rest of his friends. I also didn't really want to get into a scrap with 6 Sanguinary Guard, Dante, Mephiston, a Fights vs. Calidus, and a Surprise Sanguinor, so I didn't push forward into that golden nightmare wall. I moved my cursor just slightly out of this ruin to get the shots off onto the Combi Lieutenant to get the +1 to hit debuff, and then moved back behind the wall, and then my Flame Centurions moved just over the wall to completely delete him. Assassination scored for 5 points. Combi Lieutenant then stood back up due to his enhancement. I still get the points, but now he's back on 3 wounds and still holding that area. I spread these Vanguard veterans on the backline to protect from Inceptors and moved my tanks a little bit forward to get onto my objective behind this terrain piece with my Assault Centurions backing them up. I hopped these Devastated Centurions out to try and get some angles to keep the Inceptors at bay, and my other Vanguard veterans came up behind the Repulsor for countercharges. I'll be honest, this was just an absolute mess of a first turn. I was trying to play defensive to weather the incoming Sanguinary Storm, but I needed to get presence on the board. I have fast moving jump units that barely moved, and all of my big shooting is blind to anything coming in. I also didn't really appreciate the board control that Reese could get with the Calidus and Scouts, which really blocked my teleported Centurions from getting any work done and not really finding any good angles. A better first round would have been something like this. Start the 6 Centurions on the board, they can protect my backline. Assault Centurions in the Repulsors, one lot gets out and moves forward, forcing the reactive move. Then Repulsors can move much further forward. Yes, they'd be out in the open, but they'd also block getting onto this objective. And if one gets destroyed, 3 more assaults get out with their OC6. I can move a 3-man squad of Devastators onto the objective as well to back them up, and then 2 lots of Vanguard Guards just absolutely yeet themselves into that block and force the Sanguinor to appear. This is Editor Paul speaking. I've now realized that the Sanguinor starting on the board meant that it couldn't teleport in turn 1. So I was always safe from a Sanguinor appearing. I think I was more worried about the Fights vs. Calidus. So that also would have been mitigated if I'd thrown 2 units at it. So that's just me being not smart. Anyway, back to the rest of me being dumb. The Assault Centurions can also try and get evolved if they get a decent charge. An alternative plan would be to take all that stuff and just yeet it at the scouts that will still have to be on the board because they cannot be picked up if I'm within 6 inches. If I can force them to stay on the board and not be able to uppy downy, that makes the board way clearer for later apparating Centurions. With between 6 and 12 Devastating Centurions holding the back line from potential Inceptor threats, I can also use a Deadly Prize to sticky up my home objective and get these incursors moving as well. With Reese's character positioning on the walls to avoid a wall touch charge, I could get mini area denial and potentially get lucky and nab a character in that melee as well. If I went up this way towards the Vindicator and Intercessors, I could have essentially flipped the board. Yes, the Inceptors could come down somewhere and cause some havoc, but I could then easily trade them with my Devastating Centurions. Due to my hesitation and fear of things like the Sanguinaut and the Inceptors, I played way too far back. I snagged Assassination, but at what cost? Reese's turn 2 and the torment begins. Dante and his 3 Sanguinary Guard get onto my objective, ready to charge the Repulsor and Assault Centurions. The Inceptors come down around the Combi Lieutenant and delete my Assault Centurions, and the Scouts and Callers completely block out the board from any incoming Centurion threats. And generally, I just got completely hemmed in. I also then made a massive mistake by deciding to heroic intervention with my Vanguard vets after my Assault Centurions and Repulsor were charged. I thought that maybe giving the squad another target to go after might keep something alive, and maybe some extra bodies on the objective would keep that in my favor for my turn, but all it really did was get them killed along with the Assault Centurions, because Sanguinary Guard are extremely potent fighters, so that was dumb. At least my Repulsor stayed alive, I guess. The objective was no longer mine, and so I would not get any primary for it. Oh, and to add insult to injury, Reese had drawn Secure No Man's Land and Storm Hostile Objective. In my turn 2, I got Sabotage and Area Denial. I fell back the Repulsor, and my Devastating Centurions delete Dante and his Sanguinary Guard. I need to get something back, so my Vanguard veterans fly towards the middle objective, and I drop down my 6 Devastating Centurions in basically one of the few places they can to remove the Inceptors. And this begins the cycle of not being allowed to play the game. Reese pulls good cards and throws some Sanguinary Guard at my Natural Expansion, as people are now calling the objective nearest to a deployment zone because they realize StarCraft terminology exists. I would fall back, delete those Sanguinary Guards, and the next turn Reese would throw another set of Sanguinary Guards at me. I'd then have to fall back and delete them, and now he has no more Sanguinary Guard. Huzzah! But it's round 5 now, and I'm still in my deployment zone. Reese ended the game with the Calidus, Mephiston, and the Combi Lieutenant alive, and he never even used the Sanguinaut in combat at all. The threat itself was worth its weight in points, as any charge I made towards the end of the game would be instantly defeated, because I just didn't have the body to just throw lots of stuff at something to at least divide the Sanguinaut's attention. The only real thing it did was allow him to score behind enemy lines in turn 5, because both him and the Calidus could fit in a tiny pocket of non-screening in my deployment zone. Also, this fucking scout stayed alive all game, because somehow my Devastating Assurance could not even kill 5 fucking scouts with their strength 9 D3 missiles, because Reese saved a disgusting number of 6+. I know I said I wouldn't talk about the RNG, but my god, that was a horrible roll. The end of the game tells a all too familiar story to me. I killed a lot of Reese's army and still had 7 Devastating Centurions left. But what's the point in having 7 Devastating Centurions if the game is over and they can't go anywhere? If the game was pure deathmatch, or if 40k lasted 20 rounds, this army would do fantastically, but every loss is a very similar story. I've killed a lot, and I have a lot left in the tank, but whilst I may have won the battle, I've lost the war. A 57 to 92 loss. I managed to stop the 100 due to Mephiston not actually managing to remove my Vanguard veterans around 4, thank Christ for the 4+ Invuln, and then had the Combi Lieutenant fail a battle shock, which took that objective away from Reese, going from a total of OC 2 versus 1 to 1 versus 1. But again, that early game meant that my primary was lacking, and my secondary was also pretty poor. Any secondaries that required being in his half of the board were basically impossible. By using those excellent screening units, stopping my advance, keeping me locked up, and having a massive threat if I tried to overstep, Reese really showed the weakness of my army and my abilities as a player. My hesitation in the face of those threats and my aversion to overextend repeatedly were really pronounced in this game. But it was a good game to help me understand more about how to play and how my army operates, which is exactly what I want to get out of going to these tournaments. So, what is next? What have we learned, and what can we change to really get the Screaming Ravens soaring? I've got a few ideas for the list, but there is a point here where I may need to turn to the dark side of the competitive scene. So far, I'm not doing that, but there is potentially a future where, if I really want to get some results with my 18 Centurions, I may have to make some sacrifices to the dark side. In those recent 3 friendly games, I tried swapping out the Phobos Lieutenant and the Tech Marine for a squad of Heavy Intercessors. I went with Heavy Intercessors because they're built and undercoated, so I could paint them quickly if they work out well. well, and they did actually do quite nicely as a home field objective holder, allowing my second incursor unit to get forward more. I've also now made Shrike go alone, which has also been very effective as a way to get a unit up and down for free and getting a lot of nice secondaries with a small footprint. It also allows me to get 3 fast jump units on the board at the start, separate to Shrike, and get them around the board. However, these changes still haven't solved the core problems the list has, which is that those fast units still die quickly, my centurions can't make it across the board, and I'm still very weak to infiltrators and enemy movement shenanigans. Also, this version of the list really shows areas where I could fall into that competitive mindset. If I swapped the heavy intercessors out for regular intercessors and made 2 squads of Vanguard vets jump intercessors, that's 70 point save. That is a combo lieutenant, which is an amazing infiltrating threat and one of the units that caused me so much headache against Reese. As I'm using Shrike, jump intercessors are also OC2, which is amazing for stealing and holding objectives with even just a few models. But they lose that 4-up invuln, so I do need to be careful there. The 4-up invuln I do find quite valuable. But really, it comes up against things that are -2 AP, and if those things are firing at the intercessors, they're not firing at my centurions. It's something to think about. I could run these models as jump intercessors. These 2 models here go in different squads, because I'm a massive nerd and I can identify which squad the F-Zero Vanguard vets is in which, because half of them represent good guys and the other half represent villains. That's just how I am. And because these are easily identifiable as power fists, I can very easily say they're the sergeant with plasma pistols. I would then just have the rest with regular pistols, so I don't have to identify an exact model and be confusing for an enemy. So I'd lose out on a plasma pistol in each squad, but to be honest, I'm barely using the pistols on these guys. I also don't want to change too much of my list between events, because I won't learn enough from the changes I make. When making changes in testing, you never want to change more than 1 variable at a time, as it would be very difficult to identify which change in particular caused the different results. I have an end goal list that I think will actually do really well, but I need to get there iteratively to make sure that I get a full understanding of the result and a full comprehension of what changes cause what effect to my army list. For this upcoming Winchester GT, I'm swapping out a repulsor and adding back in the unit I've used before, 3 Bladeguard veterans with the blade-driven deep judicia. One issue I've had with my list, whether that was with the heavy intercessors or 2 characters, was that I wasn't really getting any use of the fantastic enhancements that the Vanguard Spearhead has access to. I also just need something to hold a forward position and stop approaching scouts and other infiltrators, and 3 tough Bladeguard and a precision judicia with fights first make an excellent threat that I can put somewhere to get that forward position. If I did the Vanguard vets for jump intercessors and the heavy intercessors for diet heavy intercessors, I could get that combi lieutenant, but I don't have time to do that, and also I really value heavy intercessors' ability to take a ton of damage, especially in Vanguard Spearhead with that detachment rule. And they just look really cool. I mean, look at them. Outside of the list building, the other thing I'm going to do is start using a deadly prize. I keep forgetting to use it, as I worry if I leave my home objective it will be taken, but I need to set that up and get things like heavy intercessors and incursors forward more aggressively, as they can advance with their assault weapons. I have plenty of Devastate Centurions that can help hold the backline. I can use one of those to wire the explosives on my home base and then move them forward or teleport them away. Even Shrike could start there and then be pulled up to do it. There's a lot of options with it. And it also means I'm not leaving stuff behind that just doesn't do anything while the rest of my army gets wiped. Heavy intercessors on a middle objective would be really good. Even starting to deadly prize those would be really nice, especially if I can get even the Bladeguard to do them when they infiltrate. This list and this attachment is very command point heavy, so I do need to be careful with this. It may restrict my uppy downy stuff or my Strike from the Shadows, but it might be more worth it. There's a lot of other ways I can get that damage through, and moving around Devastated Centurions more slowly might actually be helpful. Losing the Repulsor might also seem bad for the movement by Assault Centurions, but most games, at least one Repulsor either dies super early, or I just get the Assault Centurions out turn 1 anyway. That Tech Marine, the damage output isn't fantastic except against Oath targets, but popping out for an Oath target means that it usually gets hit back, and I have a lot of other things that can deal with Oath targets. The other option is starting the vehicleless Assault Centurions, probably the Melter ones, in reserve for a rapid ingress play, which has worked in the past for me. And then the other direction here is to replace the Repulsor with a Land Raider. It's tougher and it has assault ramp, but I really don't want to buy a Land Raider, and the Emergency Embarkation has actually proved to be really useful in a fair few situations. It is also 40 more points, which I'd have to save through a couple of other ways I could save things, and also I'd want to use the Redeemer, which is way more expensive, but the Flamers are super cool, so Repulsors for now. Something else I suppose I could consider is that with a single Repulsor, I could put Devastators in there with a squad of Incursors, because they do fit, allowing the Incursors and the Devastators to pop out. Use the Incursors to get that +1 to hit, and then destroy something along with the Repulsor firepower. But that would also leave both Assault Centurions walking up the board. It's something I need to think about, right? Against certain matchups, though, it might be really good. Imagine something with a huge threat that needs to be dealt with, and then on turn 2, move up the Repulsor, get the Incursors out with the 3 Devastated Centurions, drop in 6 more behind, and suddenly anything in the game dies to that. But that probably is also very much overkill. I am having such a blast playing this game right now. 10th is really fun for me. The tournament scene is great. Both the UK and my local community are awesome. I've met some great people, and also trying to solve this puzzle of making this list work is actually really interesting. I'm really enjoying that. I'm not the best player, but from going to these tournaments and meeting more people, I am playing more games, and I'm starting to become more confident in my abilities. And I actually think that this list can do some real damage. I don't generally give myself goals or expectations in these tournaments because giving myself a target and missing it will make me all sad and unhappy, and I'm not emotionally mature enough to handle minor disappointments. But for this tournament this weekend, I will give myself the aim of getting 2 wins and 3 losses. I actually believe that that is achievable. I've just got to actually achieve it. There are so many other avenues that I want to talk about with this list regarding other units, other detachments, different playstyles and tactics. So let me know in the comments below your thoughts and tell me about your weird lists that you've made that actually do surprisingly well. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, go to like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And if you really enjoyed it and to help support me and my Centurion addiction, become a member of Patreon like all of these excellent people. Your support helps keep this channel alive and gets you access to the super secret supporters club, where we meet up and go on Screaming Raven Centurion themed walks that are 1 kilometer long but take 17 hours.